Good evening and welcome Vaishali ma'am and also Kanika. Hi. So I think we have our almost all our guests here. We're just waiting for the Honorable Union Minister to join. And I think she's running about 10 minutes late. So while we wait for her, we thought we can just utilize this time by, maybe having some informally discussing something and asking questions. If anybody from the audience has any question to ask any of our panelists. So if I may request all the panelists to, switch on their videos. Renata, Dakshita. Yeah. I can't see. Vaishali ma'am, if you can switch on your video as well. Just wait. Yeah. So if anybody from the audience has any question for any of our esteemed panelists, I know we normally do that at the end, but might as well make, productive use of the time, little bit of time that we have before we start off. Okay, if nobody has a question, then I will actually pose a question, and with the permission of the moderator. So my question would be for Dakshita ma'am. So, ma'am, we recently had the union budget. It's earlier this month. So while it was a very, very, transformational, and the budget received a big thumbs up from India Inc., and it was a good budget. Most sections were satisfied with it. But from a gender perspective, what areas do you think the budget could have touched upon, especially considering that, post-COVID, women were disproportionately affected more? So in terms of, say, skilling or education, anything that do you think that the budget could have touched upon, especially for gender? If you have to unmute yourself.
One of the things we have to understand about this budget in particular is that it's a continuation of a series of what the finance minister called mini budgets which came before, and what is called the Atmanirbhar, and a lot of packages were given. You could recollect one of the first packages gave 500 rupees in the accounts of women, and that was immediately to carry them through the stress of lockdown. Similarly, other things came. And what we have to understand is that the government had already enabled credit flow to women. It had already taken care of the immediate liquidity problem. It has been giving special boost in variety of small measures. And in this budget, what it has done essentially is that it has continued with its focus on the education, health, housing, all those benefits which are continuing schemes. So in a sense, it's a perfect marriage of the short-term measures as well as the long-term policies of the government of India. Per se, I don't think that the budget could have really factored in, especially anything for women. And if for people who would like to read a little bit more, there is a gender budget statement called the Statement 13, which details so many schemes where there are outlays of this nature to benefit people from a gender lens.
Right, thank you.
Okay, so hi. Hi. So good to see everybody, and thank you for joining on time. And we got a message that Smriti is coming out of a meeting, so she's perhaps going to be a few minutes late. I was just suggesting to Dipankar that often these discussions carry on so long that we really have an opportunity to get the audiences engaged. So, I think we are getting a couple of questions from the audiences, but till such time that, they're not coming in, I wanted to also ask Renata a question. That as Dipankar asked Dakshita the point on gender budgeting, in your experience, have you seen this being done in a way which is an integral part of the budget and has had an impact, which has been effective? We'd love to get some color on that if you have any.
Yeah, sure. So thanks so much. I think in terms of promoting the equality of men and women, gender equality in general, there's no quick fix, and there's no silver bullet. I think we're often looking for silver bullets, and we often sort of narrow down on a particular issue and say, oh, this is if we could only fix this, then we would have perfect equality between men and women. And I don't think that's the case at all. It's a complex issue, right? And we know very well it's not just a hard issue where it's a question of policies and programs and schemes and structures and these kinds of things. It's also a question of mindset and behaviors, which gets into an even more complex realm of things. So the countries that have excelled at empowering women across the board, whether we're talking about access to basic services or whether we're talking about their economic empowerment and participation in the workforce or political empowerment, countries that have done the best are the countries that have utilized a whole range of tools to make a dent into this difficult issue. And so specialized budgets or budgets that earmark or that specifically target women is one thing, but it's only one thing. And there's a whole range of other things that are needed as well. The legal framework needs to be aligned with gender equality. The policies, the whole issue of quotas. I know it's a very sensitive issue and delicate, and different countries have different approaches to it, but we have to face up to it. Those countries that have had quotas tend to do better. I'm not saying they always do better, because it's not a question of just quotas or non-quotas. It's a question of utilizing the quotas in an intelligent way, approaching them intelligently. And if they're approached intelligently, they can actually make a big difference. But it's also a question of awareness raising. It's a question of unpacking stereotypes. It's a question of helping society appreciate women, value women, whether it's economically, socially, or women as leaders, because women bring special characteristics and qualities to leadership, or whether it's a question of trying to get at some of women's own self-inhibiting barriers to their own participation. And there are many, we know that. So I would say that in general, the countries that have done the best are those that have taken a well-rounded approach, have taken measures at the legal level, have taken measures at the policy level, have taken measures with respect to budgets, with respect to special programs, and with respect to awareness raising of the public, removing physical barriers to women's participation across the board, and also trying to chip away at societal preconceived ideas as to what women are or are not capable of. So that would be my general answer to your question.
That's such a well-rounded answer.
So, I think the Honorable Minister has joined actually.
Okay. Dipankar? Hello?
Vishali, I think he's on a call.
Yeah. It's perhaps the office.
Yes,
dialing.
the office, correct.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we can continue our conversation for a little bit more and just, wait. And I really appreciate this time which we've got to chat as we wait. Malvika or Dipankar, please flag when the minister has dialed and logged in so that we can stop. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I had a call from the minister's office, so I think they were confused with the Zoom ID. So I just had to resend the Zoom ID to her office. So she should be joining soon. I'll flag off as soon as she's ready to join.
Maybe I can ask you a question, Vaishali, while we wait to set the stage for this conversation, is to also ask from a personal point of view for you, why is this issue so something that you feel so strongly about? What motivates you at a personal level to be such a champion for gender equality?
That's a good question. And I've never really thought about it as to why. And but now that you ask and I think about it, and I just look back, like what was it in my life that sort of triggered this? I think I'm not sure. As far as I'm concerned, I've always as a kid as well, I had a brother in the house. I mean, I had very fair parents. So when we had to run and get bread in the market, it was both of us who would go in a bike. Whether it was, I've seen that the minister has joined. Namaste, Smriti ji. Thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure.
We just took the liberty of having a chat before you joined, and we were talking about gender issues in real life and what triggers it in us. So, and there's a lot of soul searching which happens, but thank you so much for joining. We will formally start the session, and I will request my colleague, Dipankar Bose, to kick it off with introductions. Over to you, Dipankar.
Thank you so much, Vaishali. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Dipankar Bose, and I work with Vaishali in the corporate communications team at Renew Power. On behalf of Renew Power and Renew Foundation, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome all of you, Honorable Union Minister and esteemed panelists and moderator, to this webinar for today. The theme for today's webinar is realizing the vision of women-led Atmanirbhar Bharat. So, and I think it's a very, very topical theme, given that we are doing the countdown to yet another International Women's Day. We've just had a devastating global pandemic, which we all know has affected women much more. And so, as India rebuilds under the dynamic leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, who has given the call for Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's very important that women are also included in this development journey. Women who constitute 48% of the population in India are confident today. They are full of potential and talent. And as India moves forward to a $3 trillion economy, it would be only just and fair that we tap into this huge reservoir of talent that women constitute at all levels. So before I start, so that's what a little context for this webinar. I want to take a little bit of time to introduce Renew Power and Renew Foundation for those of you who may not be aware. So Renew Power is India's premier renewable energy independent power producer, set up by Sumant Sinha in the year 2011. We began a journey in 2012 with humbly with the 25 megawatt wind plant in Jasdan in Gujarat. And it has been a phenomenal journey over the last 10 years. And we've grown into one of India's largest clean energy companies. Today, we have a portfolio of an aggregate portfolio of about 10 gigawatts of wind and solar farms spread across 9 states in India. And our vision is to keep growing and accelerate India's clean energy transition away from polluting fossil fuels towards clean energy and contribute to Prime Minister Modi's call for 450 gigawatts by 2030. But that's our core business. Beyond business, as a socially responsible corporate, We're also passionate about, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We envision a more inclusive, fair, sustainable, clean future. And for that, SDG 5, which looks at gender equality, is a very important ingredient. And Renew Foundation is, actively involved in, advancing, with the thought of advancing the SDGs. And the one way we do it is by encouraging dialogues, because we believe in the power of dialogues. We feel that that's the best way to stimulate, discussions, exchange of ideas, so that we can, move forward. So that is the thought behind today's webinar. And now I would like to introduce our esteemed guests, beginning with Honorable Union Minister for Textiles, Women and Child Development, Srimati Smriti Zubin Irani. She needs no introduction. She is a very, very famous personality, but just to, introduce her to the larger audience. Mrs. Smriti Zubin Irani was elected to the Rajya Sabha, the upper house of the Indian Parliament, twice, representing the state of Gujarat in 2011 and 2017. In 2019, general elections, she was elected to Lok Sabha from the Amethi constituency. She's currently the Union Minister for Textiles and Women and Child Development. In the previous NDA government, she has held portfolios of Union Minister for Human Resource Development, as well as for Minister for Information and Broadcasting. She has previously served in the organization in various posts, such as National Secretary, a 5-term member of the BJP National Executive, Vice President of BJP Maharashtra Youth Wing, Maharashtra BJP State Secretary, National Vice President, and National President of BJP Women's Wing. She has successfully pursued permanent commission for women in the Indian Army by facilitating legal aid to women officers. She has also launched Saksham, the first ever vision document released by any political organization in India, which underlines policies, programs, and implementation tools for the upliftment of the differently abled in India. In the 126th Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Mrs. Smriti Zubin Irani was unanimously elected as a member representing the Asia-Pacific region to the task force responsible for establishing the first ever committee for young parliamentarians in the IPU. At the same assembly, Mrs. Irani was also unanimously elected by member nations as a rapporteur for the Standing Committee on Sustainable Development, Finance and Trade. The World Economic Forum has named Mrs. Irani as the young global leader from India in the year 2015. Honorable Minister, we are very honored to have you at this webinar with us today. Moving on to introducing our other panelists for today. So I'll start with Vaishali Nigam Sinha, who's the Chief Sustainability, CSR and Communications Officer at Renew Power. And she's also the founding chair of Renew Foundation. Women empowerment and economic empowerment of women and sustainability are issues very close to her heart. She's striving to create a socio-economic order characterized by deeper sensitivity towards environmental issues and more empowered women. She chairs the UN Global Compact Network India's Gender Committee. She's also chair of South Asian Women in Energy, a body set up under US ISPF to promote diversity and gender equity in the energy sector, and also the Confederation of Indian Industries Indian Women Network. She's a member of the Advisory Council of India Climate Collaborative and serves on the President's Advisory Council at Wellesley College and the Columbia Global Center's Advisory Board. Vaishali has been named in She the People TV's 40 over 40 Women Achievers list, Asia's most influential women in renewable energy, and India's top 25 impactful CSR leaders. So Vaishali, warm welcome to the webinar. Moving on, we have with us Ms. Renata Desalian. She's the UN Resident Coordinator for India. She has served the United Nations for 35 years in Africa and Asia, including 15 years as Resident Coordinator, Humanitarian Coordinator, and UNDP Resident Representative. Before taking up her assignment in India, she was a Senior Fellow at the Oslo Governance Center in Norway at UNDP. She has also served in various capacities with the UN in Mali, Laos, and in New York, making important contributions in the field of good governance and poverty reduction. So welcome, Renata. Moving forward, we have Ms. Dakshita Das, a senior bureaucrat with over 35 years of experience in the government as a civil servant. Her experience spans over several verticals, including infrastructure financing, public finance, and the financial sector. And she has also been the MD and CEO of National Housing Bank. While working in the Ministry of Finance, she introduced the concept of gender budgeting and drove the program to capture resources to align policies and programs which map gender inclusion. And Ms. Das has also written extensively on gender issues. She's also a published author of 2 novels. Her alma mater recently awarded her with the Distinguished Alumni of the Year award. She has represented India in various forums, including the United Nations on gender budgeting. And she's been on the visiting faculty of the National Institute of Financial Management. So welcome, Dakshita ji. And then to go on to our moderator for today's panel discussion, Kanika Chawla, who is the program manager for UN Energy. And she's been actively involved in sustainability related and energy, sustainable clean energy related matters. And she's also working as with the SE for All initiative of the UN. So we have a power-packed panel and of experts and moderator today for this discussion. I would now like to hand over to Vaishali Nigam Sinha to deliver the welcome address and welcome the Honorable Union Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipankar. Thank you for those introductions. Honorable Union Minister for Textiles, Women and Child Development, Smriti Irani ji. Thank you for taking out the time and being here with us today. It means a lot to us. Really appreciate it. Esteemed panelists, Ms. Renata Desalian, Dakshita Das, Kanika. Each one of you is extremely special, and I have been inspired by the work you do. So I'm very grateful for your presence here, and I'm really looking forward to a great discussion with all of you. All the audiences present here, I know we had a lot of registrations and a lot of interest in this session with really inspirational women leaders. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome each one of you to this webinar, which has been organized by Renew Foundation on a very topical theme, which is realizing the vision for a woman-led Atmanirbhar Bharat. We are honored to have Smriti ji, who has been a great contributor by what she does, but more importantly, by who she is. I can tell you that when young girls, women, people in business, people in the villages, when they see leaders who are having an impact with confidence, they really get inspired, and that's an important way in which we can bring about the change we are talking about today. So thank you for doing what you do, Smriti ji, and you inspire a lot of us, not only here in India, but really across the globe, because people are watching India closely. And, one thing which I'm really proud of is that when you go overseas, I think the fact that India has many women leaders who are making their presence felt is well understood and respected. So thanks once again for being who you are. Just before we get into the rest of the session, I wanted to just bring the attention to the fact that we have an International Women's Day. It happens year on year, but the more important thing is, I think every day is a Women's Day. And I think that's the mindset with which we need to have this discussion. And what I wanted to say was that as we go on, even after this discussion, we are going to continue the takeaways from here so that we can engage with the government, with international organizations and other key stakeholders to take this discussion forward and hopefully have more impact around what we're going to be talking about today. I wanted to really appreciate the dynamic leadership we have in our country, led by our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji. We've taken a number of significant policy measures to empower women and ensure that they have equal rights and equal growth opportunities, and they are at the center of our agenda and our narratives. Since taking over the reins, Shri Smriti Irani ji has led from the front in implementing and expanding schemes which are extremely important and critical some of them being Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Prime Minister's Ujjwala Yojana, Mahila e-huts, Mudra Yojana, and the list is long. But what is really significant is that we are seeing that a lot of work is being done around these schemes. And that is important and it's extremely critical as we march ahead in the direction of creating an Atmanirbhar Bharat, where women will be at the center of this transformational experience we are going to be seeing over the next few years. Our Prime Minister gave the clarion call for Atmanirbhar Bharat with an eye on converting a challenge to an opportunity for building a new self-reliant India with enhanced economic might. Today, as we build back the economy, especially post-pandemic, we must ensure, as I said, that women should be at the center of it. They constitute nearly half our population. They have to be an integral part of the journey. Smriti ji, as I said, when we see you leading, we have hopes, we have expectations that we will be able to fulfill this dream. India's journey towards a $3 trillion economy can only be accelerated if we are able to tap the full potential of our abundant Nari Shakti and ensure the economic mainstreaming of women. You know, all of you have probably read the McKinsey report where you've seen that advancing gender parity will add about 770 billion to India's GDP. So it's not only a social matter, it's an economic matter, and it's going to lead to holistic development of our country. With this being said, I wanted to say that hopefully we are marching ahead in the direction of a woman-led development in India, and we hope to also achieve the development of women as we do that. I'd now like to invite the Honorable Minister to please share her vision for economic empowerment and mainstreaming of women. I'd like to invite Smriti ji to deliver the keynote address for this session today.
Thank you, Vaishali. I think in the interest of time, you have an esteemed panel that has done much for the cause of women in the country and internationally. They have been topics that have been much deliberated and reflected upon. The compliments for initiatives being undertaken by the Government of India solely go to the Prime Minister. It is under his leadership in the year 2014 that the Government of India first spoke about the need to ensure that we keep our girls in educational institutions, and one of the primary needs for such girls was better infrastructure, especially toilets. It is for the first time in the history of our politics, in the history of our democracy, that we saw a Prime Minister from the ramparts of the Red Fort speaking about the needs for women in terms of sanitation, hygiene, and better health. And under his leadership as Minister Education, I had the privilege of ensuring that in collaboration with states, the central government built over 4 lakh toilets in all government schools across the country. The result was such that we managed to curtail the dropout rates amongst girls, especially post grade 8. One of the other initiatives that the Honorable Prime Minister undertook in 2014 itself was ensuring that women have more access to banking facilities. And that is why when Jan Dhan Yojana came about, till then, Indian women had only 28% of them and access to a bank account. I'm happy to share with you today that in the past 6 years, we've seen that number blossom to over 40%. And today, 22 crore women have for the first time in their lives opened a bank account under the leadership of the Prime Minister. There was much debate about what is the efficacy of such bank accounts when women have access to such financial services. And I think that the pandemic showed the biggest advantage that can be accrued to women with such financial service and with such financial support from the Government of India, when over 30,000 crore rupees was directly transferred from the Indian Treasury into the bank account of these 22 crore Indian women. I must say that many amongst you are aware of the fact that access to clean fuel was a challenge for many Indian women. In fact, in India, research suggests that pre-2014, every year, 5 lakh deaths occurred due to non-availability of clean cooking fuel. Since then, the Honorable Prime Minister, under the aegis of the Ujjwala Yojana, ensured that 8 crore Indian poor families and women received clean cooking gas. And this budget, there was an announcement of an additional 1 crore women. When we speak about issues of empowerment, when we speak about self-reliance and Atmanirbharta, we need to recognize that it is the foundation of education, health, better financial services, access to speedy justice. These are the very foundations on which a self-reliant woman stands on. And be it the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao program, which successfully saw the curtailment of determination of sex of a child at birth, or for that matter, determination at a fetal stage, we saw the numbers go up from 918 in the year 2014-15 to around 934 in the year 2019-20 because of the people's movement that was also a part of the Prime Minister's flagship program. I must here add that while we are amongst enterprising women today, they have been, and you've rightly quoted the McKinsey report, there has been a World Bank report which says that if there is gender parities in the salaries or the revenues that accrue to men and women, we will see an additional $160 trillion added to the global economy. The average income of individuals would go up by over $23,000 per person. That being said, while we've made an economic cause for empowerment of women, there is also the cause of politics, which begins from power sharing from homes onwards to parliament. And I am joyous that, yes, women have climbed the stairs of success when it comes to political power in parliament and in legislative assemblies, but we should not shy away from celebrating the 1.2 million women who currently politically serve at the grassroots, at the panchayat level. It is these voices, it is these contributions that are not many a times highlighted enough. And I think that it is these women who need to be celebrated often. I think that when the Prime Minister started the Mudra Yojana, we would recognize that it was not specifically driven for women. But yes, there was a recognition that one of the greatest challenges that lower middle income families and especially youngsters and women face in our country is access to easy credit, and that to credit without collateral. And with the birth of the Mudra Yojana, I was extremely excited to see that of the 27 crore loans which have been given to citizens across the country, 70% of the beneficiaries were women. Now, why is it a double cause for celebration? There was this prejudice and a presumption that women do not know, and especially those who do not come from very privileged means. They do not know how to make a business plan, let alone approach a banker to get credit. The fact that 70% beneficiaries, which are women under the Mudra Yojana, the fact that women are accruing support under the Stand Up India project or the Startup India project, today we can celebrate that over 10 crore women cumulatively under all these projects have managed to give loans for their enterprises, which speaks volumes about the potential. And that is why the Honorable Prime Minister, in his address, has actually given a tectonic political and administrative shift when he says that the time has come to speak of women-led development. It is on their shoulders that we stand as a society, as families, and today it's on their shoulders, on the shoulders of our women, that will stand a new India. So my best wishes for the deliberations that will ensue, and I hope to see you on the other side, Vaishali, because there are some avenues which are not inherently very, very natural to the cause of women, one of them being renewable energy. And I think that it is these avenues which are oft ignored that we need to concentrate on to increase the participation of women and celebrate potential of women, and in fact, now establish new female leaders in these uncharted terrains. So my best wishes again to all the panelists and for the debate. And like I said, see you on the other side.
Thank you so much, Smriti ji. Thank you for your valuable advice and your suggestions. And I can promise you that I'm doing my best to advance and engage women in this very critical sector. So I'll do my best. And if given an opportunity, would be happy to share it with you. And I really appreciate the time you've taken out. And once again, the good work you're doing. And really, you inspire us. By what you're doing now and what you did some time back, and it shows your diverse and multifaceted, talents which you brought to us. Thank you for just inspiring us. And
Thank you for having
we
me.
need more like you. And thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
I request to the Honorable Union Minister before you leave, ma'am, if we could if all the panelists and the moderator could switch on their videos for a photo op so that we can take a photo of the screenshot with the Honorable Union Minister. So I'll request my colleague Malvika to coordinate this so that we can gather a photo. Renata, if you could switch on your video, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy talking.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, Dipankar, over to
Yes.
Kanika. I think in the interest of time,
Yes.
we will just dive into the discussion which we've been eagerly waiting for. I think that was a great start to this gathering today. And I'm so delighted that we can make the most of these sessions in the most innovative ways, photo op being one of them. But over to you, Kanika. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Vaishali, and thank you to everyone at Renew and Renew Foundation for inviting me to moderate this discussion. It is for me a great privilege to be here with such a prolific set of speakers. I'm not going to introduce all of you again since Dipankar already did, and I'd like to kind of dive right in. I think the minister set us up really nicely and made it quite clear that while there's a long way to go, we've also come a long way. And in many ways, it is perhaps a really good time to be a girl. And me being here moderating this discussion with the three of you is actually testament to that. Just to have access to these conversations, right, is not something that was commonplace in the past. It's not something that big corporate houses like Renew Part ever hosted in the past. And this connection between business and profit, and then SDGs, but then also how everything kind of is deeply interlinked with each other. And I think that, Dipankar started us off with this point on SDGs, and which is why I want to just take that forward, is that we often think of them as, oh, I work on SDG 7 and you work on SDG 5, and then somebody else works on, something else. They're all deeply interlinked. And if you had, say, SDG 7, which is, includes access to electricity and clean cooking, then that also has, benefits for gender. It also has benefits for decent work. It has benefits for climate. So this conversation today about gender isn't really just about gender, right? And that's kind of why this mainstreaming phrase, even though it's kind of one of these catchphrases that we use often, it has a lot more depth. And that's kind of what I want to unpack with all of you today, is when we say we want to mainstream gender, we have policies that are very targeted towards women. And then we have kind of general economic policies or general social policies. And I wanted to kind of maybe start with you, Dakshita, to kind of understand that while, of course, the policies are really important and they've brought us this far, to what extent in action do they really imbibe the spirit of gender mainstreaming? Not just, addressing kind of niche issues, but really making gender an everything issue.
Yeah, so Kanika, that's actually an extremely relevant thought which we need to debate over. What if I go into my journey of over 30 years in bureaucracy, at the end of framing policy, as well as at the other end where I was taking time off to work with a slightly lesser aware, I would say, female citizenry of this country, the gap was huge. And this gap was coming in largely, again, it's my personal view, is because India actually missed the first and the second industrial revolution. What we did was that we got everything at independence. Pre-independence, there was a lot of enthusiasm about, women empowerment, and everything came, equality came to the women on a platter. But the socio-economic framework to build that through never came. I remember when I joined the office, even in the 1980s, things like toilets for women were a bit of an issue, and I myself, in my field postings, have visited the nearby cinema hall, by bribing the guy there $50, $100, because it was an issue. It was an issue. You learn to live with it. Now you accept that women are a part of the workforce. But another thing which I find fabulous, which is happening now, is that policies have given women a mind. And nothing is more indicative of that than the turnout in the polling stations. All studies give one conclusion, that yes, women, and women in the rural areas in particular, are stepping. B, studies indicate that women are following their mind, which means the awareness has come in. Small schemes came, like you spoke about dovetailing schemes with the reality. Like there was this bicycle scheme, which was a big favorite in some states. What did that do? It gave a girl child an access to school, by use of a cycle. It worked. So all those years of investing in the soft skill development of women, I think, has paid off. It starts at birth. Also, there has been a lot of policy intervention in terms of the legal space. But having said that, I think we've still got a long way to go. One of the biggest worries as far as the Indian landscape is concerned is something maybe I'll share a little later, after I listen to the others. But yes, I think we've done well, and I think that because we missed those two challenges of 100 years growth, we had an issue, but we are fast reaching it. And it's happening, given our cultural context, it's happening very fast.
Yeah, thank you, Dakshita, and also for building that intrigue. Now I really want to know what that thing is that you were talking about. But I'll turn to Renata, and I think, Renata, you have a very interesting perch that you're on, because you look across sectors. You focus on kind of development support. So I think you have to kind of have that hawk's eye on what's not working, right? And but also you've had exposure to similar issues, but in very different packaging in so many other parts of the world. So maybe I'd like you to kind of comment a little bit on what we've got right, but also what we've got wrong here in India, or what we need to fix. Maybe not what we've got wrong. That would be a far too negative way to look at it.
Thanks so much, Kanika, and thanks also for framing it initially in a upbeat way, because I think that those of us who are working on difficult issues like gender equality, we tend to focus on all the problems, right? And of course we should, because that's our job. I mean, our job is to try to do everything possible to allow women to flourish and to flower, and equally as men. And so we often forget the progress that has been made. So I'd just like to emphasize that we have come a long way. We have definitely come a long way. Collectively, globally, we've come a long way. And India certainly has come a long way. And we should use that to inspire us and to energize us as we move forward. When I look across all the sort of main entry points or main factors that determine gender equality, and I look at India, I mean, I see a reflection of India in the global performance, so to speak. So if you take, for example, access to education and access to health, globally, I mean, we've done immense work. We've done fantastic work in terms of access. What remains to be done is more a question of quality, and there's uneven performance across the world, and also uneven performance in India. I mean, you have some fantastic educational institutes with a strong representation of women, and then you have other parts of the educational system and other parts of the country where it's less, so it's uneven. So I would say a focus on quality and a particular focus on the STEM subjects is required. And again, I'm speaking globally and in India. Globally, there are statistics that say that only 35% of women are enrolled in STEM. I mean, of all the students that enroll in STEM subjects are women, and only about 29 of them actually go into R&D. And we know that women are perfectly capable of working in these sectors, but for various reasons, many of them are just stereotypic. They could be stereotypic from the outside world, or they could be stereotypic coming from inside women, because I really cannot overestimate that women are also self-inhibiting themselves in terms of their moving forward. In terms of access to health, again, globally, great performance, good performance in India as well. I think because enabling a woman to be in control of her body is so fundamental to gender equality. There's still unmet need in terms of contraceptives in India. And so this is still an area, being able to decide the size of your family, being able to space the children according to how you would prefer, is still a big issue. Sex ratio at birth, again, good performance until now. And the Honorable Minister made reference to the programs that are in place to try to ensure that any discrimination against the girl child, even before she's born, are eliminated, and a great deal of work has been done and progress has been made there, but still some way to go. Then if we take work, the world of work and women's economic empowerment and women's political empowerment, there globally and in India, a lot of work is, I think, remaining in front of us. Politically, in terms of political empowerment and political representation, India fares reasonably well when you look globally. But I think, when you start digging underneath, there's still a lot of progress. We need a lot more honorable ministers, Smitri Iranis, scattered across the Indian political spectrum. There's a lot to say about economic empowerment, but I just give you a general overview like that. We can come back to some specifics in economic empowerment maybe a bit later.
Thank you, Renata. I think that's a really good segue to take it to Vaishali for economic empowerment, women in the workforce, and the role of corporates, which are kind of all the things that I'd like you to maybe touch on. But more than anything else, and this is, something I feel really strongly about, is what are we going to do about the energy sector, Vaishali? The minister said it, I know, feel strongly about it. And it goes to the point that Renata made around, STEM subjects, because, that is also engineering focused. And it's one thing to kind of have a position in the workforce, but then there's another to kind of make it through the workforce to the top. And even in certain aspects of it, say in administration or human resources or some of the more kind of desk jobs, even though we see quite a large inflow of women in sort of like early stage careers, they rarely will kind of, persevere, which can partly be, also attributed to this point that Renata made around self-selecting yourself out and what are the conditions that can actually change that. But then also that there are, the conducive environment may not always be available for them, which is also why they choose to opt out. So what is really the role of institutions like yours, but also who are not as woke as yours?
Sure. Thanks a lot. And that's a lot of, kind of points. But, let me start by saying, and I heard Dakshita saying it, and Renata and you too, Kanika, that let's acknowledge, let's take a moment to acknowledge we are doing well. We've come a long way, right? I think sometimes we tend to forget it. Gone are the days where you worked in a private sector organization and there was no loo for women. We're not in that environment, and that's a big deal, right? I think we are definitely, the attention has been brought to women. Women are at the center of policy making, even in corporates. Not only in great organizations, not only limited to great organizations, but almost all organizations. And what we see now, Kanika, is that if you look at the investor community as well, right, they are driving this. They are driving this whole ESG governance in which women, the role of women is pretty significant. So that's important. So I think the United Nations is driving the SDG 5, the SDG agenda, and SDG 5 is an important agenda and an important part of that. That is important. What this does is that, it makes the whole engagement of women in the economy, at the workplace, not a nice to do, but it's a must do, right? So when that happens, automatically there is a lot of transformation. So if I look at my environment, and I'll come to energy in a bit, Kanika, and I'll be crisp because I've got a lot of time to speak, so I have to say less. So very quickly, what I want to say is that there's a huge amount of opportunity in the energy sector. It's a pity that it is seen as a non-friendly, gender engaging sector. So I want to really change it. And with all of you here, I'm sure we'll be able to do our bit, because there are huge amounts of opportunities, not only in the corporate sector, in R&D, in academia. I spend a lot of my time in rural India, when, in non-COVID times, a lot more than I'm doing now. But I see there's a huge amount of potential for engaging women there. And, as we know, access to electricity is critical in these areas. And the role women can play, as we've seen in some of the entrepreneurial ventures in rural India, that women have contributed significantly when it comes to being able to play the role as distributors in some of the renewable energy, tools we can use, for cooking and various other areas. So huge amount of potential for women to be engaged. And we have to see what's an intelligent way to integrate it in policy making, so that they become a part of this sort of change we want to see, and an integral part of this change. I'll Could you try again? Sorry, that was my phone. Apologies. So I really do feel that as we are going through this transition, we must include women. It is, as I said, good for the economy. It is generally good for bringing about this change. So we have to light lives, we have to engage them. And just coming to our earlier discussion, at the policy level, things like gender budgeting, etc., will go a long way in ensuring that this whole narrative is a part of our policy making system, so that it's not a separate item sitting somewhere. It's just an integral part of how we do things, how we work, how we recruit, how we execute, etc. So I'll pause there, Kanika. I know I could go on and on, but some thoughts here.
Yeah. But what I'm taking away from what all three of you are saying, and I like the way, Vaishali, you framed it. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. So we know even though a lot of the policy shifts, whether they're at a company level or at an economy level or even at a global level, we don't have them at scale, but we know what we have to do broadly. And we've got it right in some sort of, pockets, and we just have to expand that. And that's really important, that I'm not at all saying, we've got it covered, and that's, scaling is perhaps in many ways the hardest part. But one aspect which I think is often a little bit less looked upon or less addressed is the behavioral aspect. And maybe I'll give you a little quick anecdote. So I was at an energy conference a couple of years ago, and this person was talking to me about some decentralized solar application. And I said, I'll connect you to this colleague who happened to be male, because he heads the distributed renewables work. And so he looked at me and asked, what do you do? So I said, I work in energy finance. And this was well-intentioned, but this person sniggered and said he found it really interesting that my male colleague worked on rural issues and that I worked on finance issues, because he didn't say, but what I interpreted that to mean is, as a woman, you should be a bleeding heart. And so you should care about, and of course, everyone should care about rural issues, but it was like, but how can you care about finance? Or how can that be your skill set? And I think that this is the difference between, what Dakshita said around women in the workforce have become commonplace and accepted, and we're kind of racing ahead. But that's different from accepting women with an opinion or who are highly opinionated, right? And I think I want to talk a little bit about that. How do we shift the behavior? And I think that perhaps in some ways there is a very strong culture aspect to it. So maybe Dakshita, I'll start with you, given, your combination of policy, but also, grassroots level experience. How do we change that?
Oh, the change comes from within. Atmanirbhar, as they say. What is a perception? A perception is a kind of an image a person comes with about you or about a group of humans, and how you break that perception is seriously important. And I've loved it. I mean, even last year it happened to me. My male boss called me and said, the honorable minister is coming or something. I'd have forgotten who was coming. So when it comes to giving the bouquet, you shall give. I said, why will I give? He says, because you are female. I said, no, I'm not female. I'm an officer, and I'm a very senior officer. I mean, I'm number two. I'm after you. I said, why don't you give? It'll be a pleasant change if you start distributing bouquets. We did away with the ceremony because there was, both of us glared at each other, eyeball to eyeball, and that was it. But what I find is that if you go to the lower income groups, you will find that the desire to change the perception is very cunningly crafted. I was very many years ago, again, it's anecdotal, but it gives a trend in India. And that's where my hope lies. 30 or 25 odd years ago, I was posted in a very small town where there was a massive recruitment on compassionate ground of government employees whose husbands had died. And they were all at that group D level. You understand the entry point, which is like the PNs and the workers. And there were women who were who had not stepped out of the house, who were still covering their heads, and who had all been given employment with no skilling at all, no information, no skilling, and no wherewithal to run their finances. And they were only there because their husbands had tragically died. So I decided in my lunch hour to run classes for them, some 50, 60, 70. Gradually the crowds increased. And I got into trouble with my local administration, so I had to actually stop those classes. All I had was a blackboard with a chalk. And the first question they asked me is, how do we take control over our salaries and our finances? They wanted to sign their checkbooks. I taught them how to sign, which part of the checkbook to sign. Mind you, this is the pre-digital economy days. I told them you don't need to cover your head with a palla. And the last thing which I said is that if you are being exploited at the workplace, which is exactly what was happening, and the exploitation was actually, if I use a very strong word, it was actually carnal. I mean, like you had these women coming in and people were, it's like the back of beyond in Uttar Pradesh. So what I feel is that if you have to break a perception, it has to start from within you. And I also have my own personal experience and the experience of having worked in government, that change comes when the man accepts you as a co-partner. It has to be gender neutrality, both at the workplace as also in the house. And you carry that through with you throughout. As Vaishali said in the beginning, that she and her brother would both go to fetch the daily, run the daily chores. It wasn't like, oh, you will run and you will not run. It's like both of you, because you're being treated as equals on the same thing. And that's where it happens, because your own perception is a part of your daily life. And in your daily life, if you're not accepted as an equal, perhaps somewhere down the line, when you're in the workplace and when you're in a commanding situation like Vaishali is as the, as an equal partner to her husband in this great organization, somewhere she will not be a perfect leader for it. So if you have to set by example, I think it's the best way to break a stereotype. That's all from me.
Take that to you, Vaishali, because it's something that I have also observed, how you and Sumanta are equal partners in this. It's not that you will do, the foundation and he will run the company. Like there is, and I think that this is also something that you brought up earlier on. Like it isn't just, the onus cannot just be on us, while there will be some of us, just the way Dakshita described, that will push back. But there will also be times where you need someone to kind of, provide that safety net, even if it's silently, that allows you to push back. So what do you think is the role of women in shifting perceptions? The role of men in women shifting perceptions about themselves?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's the topic I'm very passionate about. Like to walk and talk it, but very well said, Dakshita, with respect to, things have to come from within. And, you can only do as much as you want to, right? And, just talking about behavior, I wanted to share an anecdote. I used to live in, I used to work from New York. I was a part of a multinational and we were doing business in India. And so I was very young. I was, I think, all of about 26, 27, and, you know, a reasonably senior person responsible for business development in Asia. And so, you know, first time, you know, I came in my business suit, right? And I said, okay, my legs are covered. I'm wearing a business suit. And so we had to go, Dakshita, for a meeting in the government offices. And so when we went for the meeting, I was accompanied by, you know, somebody who was a little bit junior to me, just a little bit junior to me. And, you know, they thought that I was the junior person. And that happened very often, right? So they would always say, Acha sir, aap baithiye, you know, like, you know, Renata, just to translate, they would always give that additional respect to the male colleague always. And it used to really bother me. But I never protested with them. But what I did was I just asserted and kept asserting in meetings without really saying much, till the time the glance moved from there and focused and stayed on the discussion, right? And who was leading the discussion. And often I say to a lot of women, even at Renew, in fact, we just had a Power of W session at Renew, which we started, you know, and that's what I was talking about. I said, have the confidence to be determined, persistent, and just don't give up that easily. You know, if somebody is asserting, assert a little bit more, make your point. And if you don't make it, nobody else is going to make it for you. So honestly, all of this is fine, but I want to focus on this bit that everything comes from within. And if we know what we want to do, and honestly, it's not really about, I want to be 50-50. It's about the best you can be and the best you can do in an organization. So even in Sumant, in my situation, and let me be very candid, it is Sumant's venture, right? I was not interested in participating in it. I did him a big favor by coming in and helping him here to set the company up and, you know, to do things in early days, because it was an entrepreneurial venture. And you needed, you know, a set of brains and many more sets of brains, because it wasn't a sector you could hire from, you know, because it was a brand new sector. So I did what I did with the understanding that I'll only do it for a certain period of time. But when you have the respect of a team, and when you have a sense of purpose, I think everything else falls by the wayside. And if you know who you are and what you expect and what you want to do, I think you are on track. And you need to have that self-confidence and self-belief that you should know your purpose and you should know how you need to get there. And yes, you know, partnerships need that respect and support. And together, I guess you can do a lot. So I'll end it there. But that's what we need. And women, definitely, whatever we say, Kanika, I think women, we need to step back a little bit. I always say that. I think we go on an overdrive at home, right? Let us get our partners do a little bit more. They're so good at it, right? I think we just deprive them of that responsibility. Often, at least I can say in India, I see in other parts of the world, it's the balance is not as tipped as it's in India. And hence the expectations are such. And hence you have to ask a lot more at work that we want to do this and that. Let's focus on paternity policies, right? And not only maternity policies. So I think things like that, I know I can go on, but these are things which will bring about the behavioral change we want to see.
So actually with that, maybe Renata, the UN has obviously done work all over the world on leading campaigns that drive behavioral shift, right? And some of them are about gender, but also about other things. So can you talk a little bit about, from your experience, of what are some of the tools and levers that we can use to drive a behavioral shift, which will also be kind of fit for purpose given the cultural context of India?
Sure. So I think, first of all, I'm really glad that Dakshita has mentioned women's empowerment in the rural context and in the, you could say, non-formal sector context, and that Kanika is, and that Vaishita has talked about it in the sort of more corporate sector. Some of the problems are similar, but some of the challenges are quite different. In terms of how to make behavioral changes, again, it's all interlinked. Just like the SDGs are all interlinked, all the tools are interlinked, and behavioral change comes across through different mechanisms. There's no question that there are some tools, which you could call them hard tools, that are related to institutions, related to laws, related to things like gender budgeting or disaggregated gender data, there's no question in my mind that, you know, countries that make it a priority will generally quantify goals. They will generally decide that it's worth measuring. There's an old adage that, you know, what you measure is what you get, right? So I think that measuring women's progress and measuring women's empowerment is super important. You might say, well, what has that got to do with behavioral change? Well, I mean, behavioral change, as I said, comes about from many different factors. And one of the factors is that the government, or it could be the governance of a corporation, but they decide that there is a priority, that there's a target, and that we're going to move towards it. And people may start doing it grudgingly, but as little progress is made more and more, people either, you know, will see the light, and I'll come to seeing the light in a minute, or they will conform because they need to conform. Of course, we'd much prefer that they see the light and they conform to these goal setting and target setting by embracing it rather than just doing it out of necessity. But even a bit of forced conforming is better than none in some cases. Now, there are various sort of techniques that we use to try to bring about behavioral change. In addition to these, some of them have already been mentioned. The Honorable Minister spoke about, she gave some statistics on the value of women's work. So we've done a lot of work also on trying to demonstrate the economic benefits of empowering women, economically speaking, to try to convince people that there's a reason why everyone will do better when women do better. There are also societal reasons for that as well. I mean, educating women and enabling women to get into the workforce is good for society. There's a leadership case to be made to try to help people understand and grasp that empowering women and gender equality has a benefit for leadership, so that you will be actually making better decisions if women are participating in those decisions. Women bring a whole different set of qualities and characteristics to the decision-making table. And if those qualities and characteristics are not present, the decisions will obviously be less robust. So recognizing what they are, also generally working with women to make up for areas where men have certain leadership characteristics that are considered stronger than women is also another thing. But I think that the hardest part is getting down to stereotypes. And this is where it's either cultural, it's societal, it's embedded in families, and a lot of times it is unconscious. When you're dealing with a conscious problem or a stereotype where people are conscious of it, it's one thing. But if you're dealing with something that's unconscious, that just comes out naturally, it's another thing altogether. And there's no substitute for just, long, hard work. Some of it which has to be forced, which is why you have quotas, which is why you have targets, etc. And a lot of it has to be done through different subtle ways, through the arts, for example, through film, through literature, through a whole range of things that inspire people in a kind of indirect manner, as opposed to throwing it at them frontally. But there's no question to me that having a supportive family, immediate family, having supportive in-laws, particularly important in India, having supportive circle of friends, and hopefully at the workplace as well, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. It's not the only thing, but it makes a huge difference. And so unpacking stereotypical ideas and unpacking why it's simply unjust, why it makes no economic sense, why fundamentally everything will be better. The workplace, the family, society will be better when women are able to enjoy the same rights, the same privileges as men. So there's a lot of things that need to be done collectively and simultaneously. It's a little bit like women who multitask all the time to respond to gender or to get to gender equality. It's going to take a lot of multitasking.
Thank you, Renata. I think that response kind of lays out very nicely, almost like, you've painted this really beautiful picture of how complex it is, but also how it has something for everyone and everyone has to play a role, but also how women themselves have to play a role. And I think that one of the things that has served me personally very, very well is the role of mentorship, right? And of having a community that you touched upon as well. And mentorship can kind of take so many different forms. This conversation is mentorship. Hearing from you, hearing your personal experiences combined with kind of everything that is your lived experience, but also academic knowledge, etc. All of this is really, really interesting. But often, and this is one of the questions that has also been asked by the audience, is it is perhaps easier for, say, someone like me who's in a city, perhaps in a very specific context, to access a community and access mentorship for, say, navigating my way through, even though a career in public policy is still not something that's super mainstream, but it's still something that I may be able to access. But say in the rural context, how can it become sort of something that rural women have access to, and where their choices are not just driven by economic compulsions, but are also kind of a bit more where they have access to safety nets, really. And I'll let, whichever one of you wants to take that can take, because I think that, this is relevant. You all have relevant experience to kind of respond to that.
Could I just jump in very quickly on that? I'm sure my other colleagues have much more to say on it, but as you said very rightly, Kanika, mentorship can take very, very different forms. And I think that, for example, the role of teachers and the role modeling of teachers, at the rural, at any level, but it would be particularly relevant to your question about rural women, is undeniable and inestimable. Because a teacher who finds a way to just give a little bit of encouragement to girls on a job well done, that could recognize, women's innate leadership, which is, as I said, qualitatively different from men's leadership, and which comes out in everything. Comes out in sports. It comes out in how you interact with your classmates, etc., etc. Even how you interact with the teacher. I think a little pat on the back, from teachers, without anything formally, mentoring, goes a long way. The children remember that. You remember when a teacher complimented you on something or encouraged you in some subtle way to do your best, that gave you confidence in yourself. That's the main thing, giving confidence in people. And I think that, of course, parents play a vital role. Feeling that your parents have confidence in you, you can basically walk on clouds. But teachers also, I would say, have a particularly important role to play, because they're one of the first sort of entries in, out of the sort of circle of the home, so to speak, the formal institutions that young people engage with early on.
And maybe if I can just, build on that question and perhaps pose it to Dakshita, is that even though there's all these schemes, right? The minister talked about how they had worked with this network of schools around the country to build actual infrastructure, and that is, reaped great benefits for keeping women or girl children from dropping out. But is there appetite, or do we need a paradigmatic shift to then just tell the teachers that this kind of, subtle pat on the back, or telling women that, you don't really need to just study history, geography, English, Hindi. You can actually, pursue a career in chemistry, even though you are maybe going to a school at a tehsil level, which is, there isn't, like, the nearest university is, like, 200 kilometers away. What needs to change? It can't just be a policy, one line of policy, right? Like, we can suppose, say, through the Renew Foundation, you go and hold these trainings to sensitize teachers. That isn't the same as the teachers being able to absorb that training and really implement it. So what is needed to make them ready to accept this?
There is a third vertical to what Renata was saying, and that is, again, the fact whether or not you have the aspiration to want to do something. There, yes, the teacher plays a role, but there has to be complementary inputs given by various foundations in this country reach out and teach people the need to have an aspiration. And it's a very simply put line, but that is tougher than having an organized classroom curriculum. And there are enough, again, incidents all around happening, but you see the desire which is coming up in the amongst rural India and girls particularly, कि मुझे IAS अफसर बनना है, I want to be in the bureaucracy. I take coaching classes for the marginalized poor candidates from Rajasthan for the IAS exam. And they are so poor that they can't even afford to buy the ticket to come here to Delhi, because you need a platform. That's why I'm talking about foundations. I have a platform. It's in the back of Beyond of Delhi in one of the very, very crowded areas. I don't know who runs it, but I go there meticulously, and it's painful because you are seeing the aspiration and the economic mismatch. And you're also seeing where education has failed. So the quality of education being what it is due to the sheer demographic pressure, I'm not berating it, I'm not denying it, I'm just saying it's a living reality due to the huge numbers. Therefore, I think the organizational support to build aspiration has to be there. And I'm sure entities, Vaishali is listening, I'm sure others who will listen, plus to education.
Yeah. Vaishali, I'll bring that to you, and I'm going to read a question out that we've got because it links very nicely to this, which says, what attitude shift do women need to bring in themselves for playing an equal role? And I think this is the point that Dakshita said, right? How do you teach someone to be ambitious? Because we know very well how women are taught not to be ambitious from the day that they're born. It's the social conditioning that some of us are fortunate enough to escape, but at home. But even then, society will still reinforce that. But how do you resist that, right? How did you?
Yeah, so, it's very interesting. I think we spoke about, you know, basically how, whether, where are the foundations for these cultural issues, right? And they clearly lie in the family. It's about how your parent looks at you when you're trying to solve that problem when you're a little baby. And either they say you can do it, or the look is like, you won't be able to do it. You, as a little girl, are observing the same set of parents when your sibling, who is a boy, doing exactly the same thing. And the narrative changes, and it's like, don't give up, you can do it, right? So the fact is that at very, very, in our early days, often, we are made to believe that either we can do it or we can't do it. We are sort of, or, we are pushed to be either very good or to stand up. Questioning is not okay. So then you are sort of setting up people to become who they eventually become. I don't know if that answers the question. And sometimes there's something within you, as that is echoing a lot. There's something within us which tells us, no, wait a minute, I can do it and I will do it, right? And I've spoken to a lot of my peer groups, women in my peer group who are successful, and they've often been inspired by or have had very supportive parents. It's quite common to see that, especially a father for girls. It's very important how they encourage their girl to believe in herself. I must say, my mother was a very, very, she was a housewife, but she believed in me. And that encouraged me to just do she wasn't a very ambitious kind of a person, but she just believed I could do things. And that was great for me. And so I think somebody in the life, a grandma, a mother, a teacher, or somebody who is an important part of your founding years helps you there. I want to come back to another point of view, actually, very quickly, that if you look at my experiences, I've spent some time in rural India interacting with women. My personal belief is that they have a lot of confidence and determination. And have you ever tried going to villages? I'm sure, few of us have, maybe in the audience. I know, Dakshita, you have perhaps. Women, when people come and ask them for votes, have you seen them? Have you seen them negotiating? These are women in the villages in rural India who we feel aren't confident. We have to go and take. I've really observed them. A lesson in bullying, demanding, and getting what they want. So sometimes I think we underestimate that. I think we need to marry it with a lot of opportunities which need to be provided, a mindset change in rural India, etc. But I have been super impressed by the confidence I've seen in many women in rural India. I'll pause here. Yeah.
Thank you. I think, you've all given a really deep flavor of what it takes. Like how much of it is personality driven, how much of it is in the home, and then how much of it is deeply structural and super layered. So I think that there isn't really, and I think Renata said this right at the start, there is no silver bullet. And there are, though, as I've been saying through the conversation, little safety nets that we can extend to each other, and some of which we can aim to extend at scale, that almost in a way are, in the short run, while some of the structural shifts are coming into play, whether it's gender budgeting or whether it's shifting in mindsets or whether it's, enrollment in STEM subjects or women leading R&D efforts, from where they go from the exception to the rule is really when we all kind of stick together, hold each other's hand through this way. I'm going to use an analogy as I wrap up, and it's the one that I know best because I work in the renewable energy sector, is when renewables was kind of gaining momentum, it was always like, oh yeah, but there's all these issues, it can't be used as a base fuel, but it's very expensive. And it was because we were trying to fit it in almost like a force fit into an old structure. And we refused that maybe the entire market design needs to change. And so when and that's the same with gender. Everything will remain the same. Nobody is going to do any of the extra lifting at home, maybe the way that Vaishali mentioned, or the creating space for greater opinion or whatever else. And so we are in that period of kind of sharp elbows, right, where we're nudging our way through. But if we really stick together, with the support of initiatives that are run across the board, whether by government or by foundations or by development support institutions like the UN, I'm absolutely certain that it will soon, the good time to be a girl is going to become a very good time, and for very many more women. So thank you very much to all of you for listening, and also to Renew Foundation for hosting this. I'll hand back over to Deepankar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanika. Well, I can say that, as the only male member on the screen, on the panel, it has been a big learning experience for me. Very, charged, power-packed discussion, very emotional, but at the same time, very insightful. So we saw all sides, very candid responses. And, it's your dexterity, Kanika, that you managed to get these responses candid as well as, insightful, informative out of all these stalwarts. So I would like to thank all the participants in the panel discussion today. Vaishali, Renata, Dakshita, all very busy, but you took time out to discuss, and this topic merits this sort of a discussion at this level. And thank you so much that you could take time out. More power to each one of you, so that you keep continuing to work for, bridging the gender gap. Kanika, I can't thank you enough. I mean, we couldn't have had a better moderator to take the discussion to this level. Very huge learning experience for me personally, as well as I hope the audience also found it quite interesting. And I would also like to thank our partners, Project Padmalaya, for their all their help in conceptualizing and developing this webinar. At Renew Foundation, we will continue to push forward on issues like this, and we feel that it always helps if we get leaders together on a common platform like this, and get them to engage and debate and discuss. And then, of course, don't forget that we're going to put this up in a report and share it with key stakeholders, because I think what we do, as Vaishali said, what we do after this is not the sort of end. What we do after this, if we can amplify that, and if we can see the repercussions, that will be the success of this platform. So on that note, thank you very much to each one of you.
We have such an august set of women here. I see we have 4 more minutes left for our session to get over. So why don't we take, if everybody's okay with it, maybe just one question from the audience, and anybody can answer it. So we have 3 minutes left now. So
yeah, I think Kanika, I've shared some questions with you. So.
Yeah. No, I tried to weave them in, but I will ask one more. How can women who are already in powerful positions help other women within their core ecosystem? This is a lightning round, so you all get to speak for 1 minute each. We'll start with you, Renata, because I see you're already unmuted, so it'll be quick.
Yeah, so I think what we can do is mentor. I think that really mentor and lead the empowerment process through everything that we do. So promote, we have to be leaders, not only leaders in our domains, technically, but we have to be gender equality leaders by the very fact that we're women.
Dakshita?
Advocacy in the workplace. Adding on to what Renata says, you have to lead the way, and advocacy becomes a very important thing there.
Vaishali?
Yeah, I would echo, and I would say mentorship and sponsorship. So I think that's very important. And if we can marry all of what we said, we'll have a different world. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think that we are definitely entering a new era. Like there was a time where when women made it, so to speak, they said, oh, I'm not like other women. And they felt that they had to distance themselves from their gender to kind of almost justify why they had the position that they had. And the world is different today. And the three of you are definitely different. And I'm very grateful to have had this chance to talk with you. And I'm sure everybody who listened, but also that I hope that we can become multipliers and that there are many more. And through a network effect, we can reach out far and wide.
Great, thanks. And Dipankar, you know how it feels when we are in a room, right? So thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Really a pleasure. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye
Thank you,
now.
everyone. Thank you to the audience as well for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, actually, Dipankar and everybody who made this possible, because a lot of effort goes behind this. And I really appreciate the effort which each one of you put to make this seem so seamless. Really appreciate that. And I look forward to many more such conversations and meeting all of you, perhaps on another one as well. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Good luck.